Welcome to Hot Topics and this discussion on who is responsible for sustainability.
I think first, we need as CIOs to make sure the IT department thinks about sustainability, thinks about its emissions, thinks about how it's contributing. But I think the other interesting thing is how we can help the rest of the business, because we own all the data. We can bring the business together, we can help the whole business measure how they're doing it and track.
There's many different dimensions to the data aspect. I think first and foremost is having the right telemetry to be able to look at what is your consumption across the technology estate. The technology estate is, in most organizations, is pretty vast. Everyone's got their own degree of legacy, I would say. So how do we bring that view back, not from how many applications have you got over what equipment is it on, that's the traditional way, but actually what is the power consumption? What is the manpower consumption? How does that translate to sustainability metrics? So we can actually educate the stakeholders. And I think education is a big part of the conversation, but bring facts back rather than just using I've got this legacy estate, I haven't got people to manage it. There are many different sides to that argument you need to bring to the table. And we're using a lot more now the sustainability data as to help that conversation and to encourage people to get onto more modern technology and build sustainable technology solutions. That's the key going forward. I think I see too many people just in the past focused on building the asset and forgetting about it, letting it run its own life. And unfortunately, you have to manage it in its life and try and keep the patient alive, as I call it.
In the organisation, everybody has got a significant part to play in both promoting sustainability, but also looking within their area and the wider ecosystem, their network, to see what we can do about it. I agree with everything that's been said already about what we can do with our own systems, with our own technology we consume, about the data that we can use to actually shine a light on some of this stuff. I think there's way more we can do as well, though. I think the use of technologies like IoT technologies, thinking about how we can ingest sensor data in a way that's smart, not just wasteful in its own right, but actually use that in a way that can actually promote the cause of sustainability. I think also there's a challenge that we think about. We tend to leap to certain elements of sustainability, which is normally around carbon consumption, actually thinking a bit more broadly about it and what that means for whole organizations about how they do the business. I think there's another challenge that as technology leaders, though, there's a nettle we can grasp. I know we've got one of our wonderful colleagues from a manufacturing sort of technology here, but if we make choices that are based around sustainability on which technologies we use, there's a huge amount of power and leverage. So if we make that a core component about every acquisition that we make, then our partner organizations that are actually developing the technology have to take note. It doesn't then become a question about what are our own sustainability goals, what are the scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions of our organisation. It becomes a challenge for them about, well, how do we take market share because we offer the best, most sustainable solution that people want to consume.
And so much of the work you do as a CIO is unpacking it and explaining it. And I agree with you. I think it's our role to talk about the environmental impact of technology, and there's some difficult things there. So, the great rush to go to the cloud, it has fantastic advantages, but we all know that the consumption of global data centers in terms of energy is very large. So it doesn't mean you don't go to the cloud, or the economic case is there, but you need to factor that in. You need to think about that, and then when people think of this as an infinite resource, actually make them aware. Well, it's not an infinite resource because it's on my budget, but more importantly, it's not an infinite resource you're consuming.
But we hear hyperscalers talking all the time about how cheap it is, how storage is so cheap. Well, it might be from a financial perspective, but the fact is if we are storing data that does not need to be stored, it's waste. And so we as technology leaders have got an educational role to play, say to people, in the same way that you wouldn't waste food, don't waste data.
Yeah.
Just because it's cheap to store doesn't mean that it's cheap from an environmental perspective to store it.
It's not good for the company, it's not good for the world,
It's back to that educational point, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we How do we become the educators around the organisation? And so we can raise the profile of sustainability. Because I always ask the question, the so what question. How do we join the dots up to make people really understand, to your point, this data is using X power, that power is actually, this is the impact to the environment. And I don't think we do a good enough job of closing that loop yet and explaining the real challenges that we're all facing.
You know, you don't need in a modern building somebody to have to switch the lights off to save the energy, do you? You know, you should have smart control systems. There are smart control systems, and as you said, you know, using IoT, Internet of Things. You know, you can see it in commercial buildings, and it's coming in. You know, the homes that we build. You know, using AI to control that. You know, it's you know, cost effective, and that's really, really important for everybody in terms of energy. It's also the right sustainable things to do. So I think, you know, again, you know, to your point about educating, we can be the bridges between what the technology can do and what the hardware that you know you're presuming do to produce the best results, you know, for the planet and for the users.
First of all, I just wanted to pick up on that subject of technology being relevant, and I think you said easy, but also cost effective. So if you think of serverless technologies, without going into huge technical detail, effectively they run when the code needs to run, and they don't when it doesn't.
The big shift here is not the fact that anybody's roles change, the fact that business and everyone's knowledge of the need to be sustainable has changed. So the very fabric in which we operate is shifted. And so it doesn't matter, you know, who it is that has to lead on that. It's part of everybody's role now, whether we're talking about, you know, the carbon aspects of it, whether we're talking about, you know, the equality aspects of it, or all of the different elements of sustainability. They are all part of what we do as organizations. And so we have to be knowledgeable in all of those areas because it's a core part of everybody's role.
But I think it's having that feedback loop, isn't it? Sharing the data so it can be fed back in, and we take note of it as well. Because for me, it starts with the architecture. What are we architecting for the future? Are we thinking beyond building the asset to the total cost of ownership and across the many different dimensions that covers? That's real sustainability, because you're thinking, because it's also the resource. We need sustainable resource. We need to have the skills that can continue for the future.